Hey, welcome to the Military Wire with Mike Schindler. I am Mike Schindler, and this is the podcast and the video cast where we interview some of America's most elite men and women who have served this country. And we share their stories of overcoming in hopes that you, our listener, get an aha moment that you can apply to your life. I would just say that today's episode is sponsored by Bone Frog Cellars, a premier and sacred wine founded by my Navy SEAL friend Tim Cruikshank and his business partner Tom Johnston. And the proceeds from this wine actually go to help the families of fallen SEALs. So I encourage you guys to check them out, Bone Frog Cellars. Be sure that you check them out. So I'm flipping the script. This is a new year, and I am flipping the script on today's guest. Typically, we have America's Most Elite. Our guest today, Bob Zadek, is not a veteran, but he is somebody that is out on the front lines fighting for the heart and soul of this country. And we are going to talk about the heart and soul of this country, especially in light of what happened yesterday. For those of you that are going to be watching this on replay, it was a storming of the Capitol, which has not happened since the 1800s. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit too, and why we're starting to see not only what is falling apart, but how do we reclaim it? So Bob Zadek is the host of the Bob Zadek Show, which is a libertarian talk show. It's broadcast live on AM stations in San Francisco, Seattle, Sacramento, Portland, and Denver. Bob talks about the issues that actually affect our daily lives from a purely libertarian point of view. So this will be interesting because I know some of you hold differing political views. So this is going to be one political view that we feature. He believes in small government. He believes in less taxes, and he believes in personal freedom. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And when you mentioned to the audience that I'm a libertarian, which of course I am, and you also mentioned that some in your audience may not be 100% libertarian, you should caution them that they will be in about 25 minutes.
Okay, well, they've got fair warning now. So Bob, this is going to be great. This is going to be super. So I want to really jump into this because there's so much going on right now. A lot of crazy. I think for those who are watching this on replay, today is January, what is it? It's January 7th, January 6th. There was a storming of the Capitol of 2021. And we're seeing, I want to unpack that. But before we do, I really want to talk about what might have been the catalyst for what we saw yesterday. And you've got a compilation book that just came out, Essential Liberty, that I want our audience to pick up. It's a compilation of interviews that you've done with guests from across the country who are experts in their field. But you feature something in there which is a hot topic, which I believe might have been a catalyst for this, which is COVID-19. And you said that there was a recent study that found that the average American believes that 9% of the population has died from COVID since the beginning of 2020. You claim that the actual percentage is around 0.04% and just 0.005% of those under 55 years old. Yet this pandemic, which we're now seeing Japan starting to shut down, we saw Scotland that I think on Tuesday said we're going to shut things down. We're starting to see that happen again here in the US. Is that a way, I'm going to ask this question very boldly, is this part of the efforts of restructuring world order, Bob?
Who ultimately, probably yes, although it's not, I don't think, a organized effort. It's separate political subdivisions, countries or parts of countries, which are led at this moment by leaders who have a common belief. I doubt that they sit around at night while you and I are asleep and coordinate their efforts, but it is just, there is a belief system that requires governments to have extraordinary power over its constituents. And when people holding that belief system get in positions of power, Biden is about to be there, they carry through on their beliefs. Frankly, Mike, just like you and I would do, if we were in power, we would organize government around what we believe to be the right thing to do. So the answer is clearly yes to your question, except I have no reason to believe it's coordinated. It's the same event happening in different places, but I doubt it's part of some cabal who meets in some underground bunker while we're sleeping.
Yeah, so there's no what you would say an organized ringleader or a council of ringleaders, maybe, but maybe just like-minded individuals who happen to be in power, sharing a same. I guess I don't. I want to be careful how I use this term, but a same progressive mindset. Um, uh, let's get to some libertarian point of views real quick, because there's the economy. There's a number of different things, Bob, that I want to address with you that I think are pretty important to our audience. But this one is a big one in that, if you look at totalitarian governments, right, where they begin to move off what has traditionally been a liberal way of thinking, which is to defend an individual and the rights of an individual and evaluate a person by their individuality. In totalitarian governments, they loop people into groups, right? They lump them into groups. And we're starting to see that here in the US. At least I believe we're starting to see that here in the US. I think we're seeing that embraced by people that are in political power. How do we break free from that? Or is this just one of those conspiracy theory thoughts that many are having, like, wait a second, I can't speak freely anymore, or if I'm a conservative, I can't admit it. If I'm a libertarian, I can't admit it. I don't know, maybe libertarians are safe from this at this point. So what would you say to that? Are we seeing people being divided into groups and judged by groups as opposed to their individual persona?
Of course, your observation is correct. It's almost goes without saying, except you've already said it. So that's too late for that little comment. But identity politics is a political tool. Divide and conquer, that commonly used phrase. The political parties themselves thrive on identity politics. Here's what I mean. Political parties do not represent, and let's take the two major political parties, which are nothing other than marketing cooperatives, but the two, because I don't represent a belief system, the two political parties make a calculation. How do they get to that magic number of 51%? And you're sitting around with the country that can be divided into specific groups, identities, if you will. And I once did a show where I commented that I probably fit into 15 groups. I'm a senior, I'm a lawyer, I have a religious heritage, I live in a certain part of the country, I'm a certain height, a certain weight. I can be categorized so many ways. None of those categories tell you a thing about who I am. It is like my zip code. It just tells you a fact. And if you're organizing for a political victory, you say, we have to get to 51. So if we pick immigrants as a group, well, they will give us X%. And let's pick public service workers. And that gives us certain other percent. And so on. And when you get to 51, you sit back and you say, okay, that's our party. We just got to 51. Not because the constituent groups have anything in common. They kind of don't. But you get to 51 and you get to be in power. So it's like a college draft of football players. You want to get to a winning system, a winning team. So you don't care about anything about a football player except are they going to contribute to victory? That's wow. If you're sitting around, and that's what political parties do. If I were to ask you, what do public service workers have in common with rural blacks? Nothing. But they vote the same way because they are told, be Democrats and we'll give you some goodies. So
I would say that the common goal would be a paycheck. I mean, if there's anything, right?
That's right. That's the reward. But the founders, which I study every moment of my free time that I have, because there's so much wisdom. Madison, in writing, I think it was Federalist 10, expressed the fear of what he called, in the language of the day, factions, which he meant political parties and he meant groups. He feared that factions would get together and would form a majority that would dominate the minority. Does that kind of sound familiar? Today, so Madison knew it, and they did the very best they could to build a compromise constitution that would put faction against faction, as a result of which no faction would accede to power because it would be neutralized by the other faction. Didn't work out as well as the founders when they were working in theory only, because it's never been tried before.
Right. Yep.
And just to finish the thought, I make in my own brain an analogy. I analogize the founders sitting around sweaty, humid Philadelphia in 1787 with the Manhattan Project, building the atom bomb with a bunch of brilliant men in New Mexico, making calculations based upon their wisdom. And they looked at each other and they said, well, it ought to work. Our calculations show it'll work, but let's push the damn button and see if we're right. Well, we are in the 231st year of the founders having pushed the button to see if it's going to work. And I'm less optimistic today than I was a mere 24 hours ago, but we'll probably get to that.
Wow. So, I think what I think something for people to take away is there is such an importance to get civics back into the classrooms, into education. I think that's been removed. I think there's only 9 states that even teach civics anymore in the K through 12 agenda. And I think that in and of itself, and what I mean by education is true education, not indoctrination, but really understanding how the principles of this country were founded. I think that is important. I want to get to the economics because you talked about this kind of this restructure, this new world order that is not coordinated, but probably it's taking place. But there's economic impact from this. So as I look at it, when in the military, we often talk about, the purpose of the mission. Why are we doing the mission? What's the end game? I want to get to that. In your book, Essential Liberty, you mentioned that the 2008-2009 crisis, the recession cost like $22 trillion. It was huge, a big number. I can only surmise what the cost is going to be, both financially, emotionally, spiritually, even for many, from what has taken place with COVID. But to what end? Is the end, Bob, in your opinion, to have a bunch of subjects under, I'm going to say, a crown, so to speak?
Well, the end is obedience. And the fact is, you said that COVID is going to cost $22 trillion. Now, that wasn't my opinion. Most of us form opinions not by going to source materials and doing original research. We learn from people who have something to teach us, whether it's your religious advisor or a wise friend, somebody, or your doctor or your lawyer. You don't study, when you're sick, you don't study medicine.
Yeah.
You seek out somebody who you said, this physician knows what I don't know. And I don't have the time to go to 12 years of medical school to get better. So I'm going to just trust the wisdom of somebody else. And you do so, and your value added is you're smart enough to be able to tell a good physician from a bad physician because you have information. And sometimes you get it wrong. And you say, what was I thinking? I hired a loser. Well, that goes in the I made a mistake column, and you do better next time. Well, it is the same with absorbing the news every day. When people express opinions, It's not an opinion formed on the basis of their original research. They have a life. They have to take care of their family and their friends and their job and their health. So what do? They use what's called voting shortcuts. They pick somebody smart. It may be George Will, it may be Tucker Carlson, whoever it's going to be. The individual's challenge is to make the right choice. Once you make the right choice, George Will is smarter than me, you say to yourself. And I like his reasoning. And therefore, you form an opinion based upon what you have learned from your private tutors who happen to be commentators and broadcasters and the like. It's the way anybody would do anything because you can't be an expert on everything. So so long as people make the right decisions on which expert to accept as being wise and giving the truth, then that's how decisions are made. So when I said the economy is going to cost $22 trillion, I didn't do the math. I have no Excel spreadsheet. I learned that from sources that I have concluded by my own intelligence are trustworthy. And the assignment that every voter in the world has, the homework assignment, is devote your energy and your intellect to making the right choices, who to rely upon for your information. You're going to get it wrong sometimes and you'll feel deceived, but that's the challenge of being a human participating in a democracy.
Let's talk about this obedience, because you said the end game is obedience. Obedience for what end, though? Just to have subjects? That's the part that I think many are trying to wrap their brain around. When we look at what has happened with COVID and what some would say, elected officials exercising more than what they have the power to exercise, locking down restaurants, closing restaurants, businesses failing, good people not being able to, have income. I got to believe, honestly, Bob, that governors sitting in those chairs do not want to impact their tax base by shutting down restaurants. So what are we not seeing here?
Well, when you say they do not want to upset their tax base, you're making a concession I'm not ready to make. And here's where it's a very soft disagreement, Michael, but let me just frame it. And I think I'm right, but maybe I'm wrong. The people who are in government are not there by accident. It wasn't random. They fought with so much intensity and so much energy, and they worked so hard to get to that role of governor, mayor, county commissioner, and the like. You say, why would you do it? What's the end game? Now, I work hard because I find it to be intellectually satisfying. I want to provide for my family, and I want to provide for some creature comforts and leave some money behind for charitable causes. That's why I do it. Now, but that's not the end game at all for a politician. The power itself is the aphrodisiac. That's the goal. And the more people you can control, the more you are at the top of the heap. So the end game, if you understand one principle, when you're in government, for most politicians, the end game is the power over others itself. And now it may be, if you want to be charitable, it's because they say, I am smarter than most other people, and I owe it to them to acquire power over them so I can protect them from themselves. And that was COVID in a nutshell. As if you and I, Michael, are not smart enough to know wear a mask, if that's the right advice. Don't sit in the restaurant and let your buddy cough in your face. That you're not smart enough to make that decision. So we have to impose upon you under fine and imprisonment because I, the elected official, am smarter. The essence of progressivism is the elites. We've heard that phrase so much in the media. it goes back perhaps to Woodrow Wilson and way before him, that they owe it to us to control our lives, or otherwise we're going to mess it up. They deprive us of the freedom of making a mistake. That is the essence of freedom, being allowed to make a mistake. If you forbid your young child to play by themselves with their friends unsupervised, you are denying them the freedom to learn on their own, to learn how to navigate disagreements, hurting somebody's feelings, and see firsthand the result and acquire their own wisdom. If you over control a child, well, we are the children of elected officials. And in the book, it is a plea. Let us make our own decisions. We accept the consequences, but do not treat us like infants. So that's a longish answer, and that's my opinion from lots of observation as to what those elected officials see as their mission is to protect us from ourselves.
But there is a time for that to happen, right? I mean, George Washington, when we were in the Revolutionary War, he, in fact, he'd quarantined those that came down with smallpox. And if he hadn't, we probably would have lost that war. So is there not a time that elected officials should step in and say, hey, you know what? Based on what we know, we need to make certain decisions. Do you agree with that? Or do you say, no, listen, you just got to let the course of what happens.
I would have warmly accepted quarantine as the organization of our country during the virus. Quarantine means you isolate the sick. What our government did for the first time in 231 years is they put people who were not sick and did nothing wrong under home confinement. That's never before happened in our country. That's the difference. Washington and every elected official under our system of government has a duty to protect me from others causing me harm. And quarantine is protecting me from a virus carrier. Valid. But to protect me from myself, to quarantine the healthy, is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where your analogy, I think, breaks down.
No, I think it's great. I'm glad you pushed back on that. I think that's important for people to know, because we do see that people say, hey, wait, this did happen before in history. But I think oftentimes we want to think in USA Today headlines instead of really diving deep into an issue where, it used to be we used to be deep sea divers on issues, and now we're like, jet skiers across the surface. What little bit of information can we gather that helps support our own narrative? I want to get to we could keep going on, Bob, because this is so interesting to me, and I'm sure it will be.
It's okay with me.
Yeah, I mean, to some of our viewers and our listeners, they're going to be like, this is good stuff. Let's talk about the storming of the Capitol. It's interesting to me because it's the first time it's been done since the 1800s, certainly the first time it's been done by Americans. And now there's a call by some to say, never forget, always remember, this was the Republicans. These were, again, it's this group putting everybody into a category. What happened? Why was there a faction of individuals that thought it was fine to go ahead and storm the Capitol?
That's a question when I'm going to have to change the format of your podcast, because we're going to need a semester, not a half hour. So I'll give you 30 seconds to withdraw your question, or
I want you to carry it on, but we will have to give me the cliff notes. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'll do the best I can to give the short answer, which will torture the listeners because they will say more. So I'll do the best that I can.
I'll plug into the Bob Zadek Show, and maybe you'll expand.
And by the way, I have a podcast. Not only do I have a live radio show, it's live streamed on the web nationally from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time on Sunday. And of course, it's podcast, and the Sunday podcast hits the Sunday live show hits the podcast the following day. So there is in my podcast archives 780 or 790 shows. So if your audience has a couple of months and nothing to do, they can just curl up with my old podcast. Sorry for the very crass promotion. I took advantage of your
It's great
mentioning. But now back to storming the Capitol. The immediate cause was Trump's irresponsible. I could use different words. I don't want to get inflammatory. I don't want to do that. But I'll just use inflammatory because nobody could disagree with that. Trump incited a riot. Inciting a riot in general is a crime. I'm not accusing Trump of a crime. I'm not getting into that. Just to put it in context. That's all I am doing. Not saying arrest the son of a gun. So, but he did something that is criminally wrong, it's civilly wrong, and it certainly is so much beneath the dignity of the office that it cannot even be mentioned anymore. And I'm going to stop. So he got people, and this is not the first day, people have been agitated and encouraged by Trump and others that this concept that the election was stolen. That's a strong word. And anybody, once you are trained that your vote is important and it's your civic duty, which I disagree with, and this is another show, to vote, and the right to vote is a cherished right. If you start with a cherished right, and then you are told by the president that a cherished right has been stolen, that's akin to the president saying members of Congress have just killed a family member. And it's the same kind of statement. It touches a nerve that is so sensitive to begin with during these times when everybody is at a very high state of agitation in general because of the split in the country that's so dramatic. That itself is a whole other topic. So here you have the proverbial lighted match in the haystack. It was waiting for anything like that to happen. So the immediate cause, and I mean immediate like 5 minutes before it happened, was Trump's behavior. Trump could have said something like, and I'm not rewriting the man or what he should have said, if he would have said, we'll get him next time at the election. Now go and work for the Republican Party and get your neighbors to understand and use the very ballot that you cherish to throw the sons of guns out of office. 2 years will come by fast. We have an election coming up. In 2 years, everything gets to be made right again. If he would have said that, everybody would have been writing checks to a political party and then go to work. But he didn't. So that's the immediate effect. Now, go back a step. Now it's a little bit more opinion. What happened earlier in 2020 set the stage because we had, with the Black Lives Matter and the riot and the George Floyd et al., and with a lot of the mainstream media tolerating it, where elected officials said, stay at home, don't get together in groups, but it's okay to riot for Black Lives Matter. So what happened was you saw the establishment endorsing and encouraging rioting. So it's like rioting became kind of the new normal. If you're angry, don't sulk. Don't go out and become active in politics. Break a storekeeper's window. A storekeeper who is less money than you have and is equally powerless, go break that storekeeper's window. That'll show them. That became acceptable, Michael. So now we have set the stage. Rioting is acceptable even if it encourages the spread of the virus. So you have people who are agitated to begin with. You have a leader who says, show them, go, they are taking away your sacred right to vote. How could anybody ask how this could have happened? The question is, how could it not have happened?
So what do you see happening moving forward? Do you think this is just going to be a wash? Like, it was so traumatic for people that what happened was inexcusable, not acceptable. It's fine to riot, but you can't, storm the Capitol. That is going too far. Do you think people are going to go back to their tribes and just say, okay, you know what, we got to reset? Or do you think this is the beginning of the end?
It's governments to cause the result they want. Now, I am profoundly supportive of small government, keep government out of our life. However, libertarians almost universally believe that no, we must have government, but government has to do only certain things. Primarily, protect me from having somebody else deprive me of my rights, my inherent rights that I have simply because I'm a human being, that are summarized to some degree in the Bill of Rights. Basically, Matt Kibbe wrote a book explaining libertarianism, and his title says it all. Don't hurt me and don't take my stuff. Matt Kibbe. Reason Magazine has as their tagline, free minds and free markets. Who doesn't believe in that? So that's government's role, just to let me live my life, make mistakes, so long as in enjoying the full breadth of my rights, they do not cause you to be deprived of the very same rights that I value in myself. Therefore, I think Biden has an extraordinary opportunity. If Biden can keep the progressives at bay and can do what he did and he boasted about when he was in the Senate, which was reaching, the phrase always is, across the aisle.
Right.
If Biden shows it's not going to be, as Obama said, elections have consequences. That statement is true, but the consequences don't have to be a victory march, don't have to be showing off in the end zone. It simply has to be calming everybody down. I don't know if Biden is up for it, but here is a chance for Biden to adjust the image he has in many people by being statesmanlike and not being, okay, elections have consequences, we're in charge now, so now it's going to be raise taxes, do all the stuff that you fear.
Yeah.
And if he is calm, the Trumpism, I believe, will wane, not going to go away, and Trump will encourage it because to him it's an aphrodisiac. He has to have it. He craves it. So I can't predict how Trump's going to behave, but I say this is an extraordinary opportunity to really be a profoundly important one-term president. And whether he's going to have the power to do it, the will to do it, the political power to do it, we'll only know. I could live with some of the policies that may happen, higher taxes, less freedom, compromising freedom of speech, giving up sacrificing student debt, writing it all off. Some of that, I can sort of hold my nose and say, I'll wait till 2022. If, in exchange, I get the civil discourse on which the country was founded.
Wow, interesting. I mean, there's a lot at stake, I think, in this year, in the next 4 years, and certainly within the next 2 years. But, one of the things we talk about in the military is this whole common, this one team, one fight principle, which is, those of us that are either part of boat crews or different crews or legions or whatever, platoons, differing views, right? Religious views, political views, historical, our upbringing, etc. But we have a common goal. And my question to you is, do you think under this new administration that we can actually get to a shoot for the moon moment? Is it possible that we as a country can somehow get united and behind one goal. I don't care if it's fixing infrastructure. I don't care if it's cleaning up the parks. I don't care if it's, we're going to Mars. I mean, what we need a John F. Kennedy moment that in the middle of a, crisis with Russia, the Soviet Union, he's like, hey, we're going to the moon, and the country rallies. How do we get there?
Well, that assumes I get as gauzy, a teary-eyed, gauzy filter over the lens view of reach for the moon, John F. Kennedy moment. You say John F. Kennedy, I say to myself, Bay of Pigs, that John F. Kennedy? I say to myself, Cuban Missile Crisis, that John F. Kennedy? And even going to the moon. If I had my way, I speak for many libertarians, there would not be a NASA. They would just be Elon Musk. Elon Musk wants to shoot for the moon, have at it. I like walking on the beach. If he likes building spacecraft to go to the moon, it's his money. He earned it, although he earned it through government subsidy. That's a whole other show. But so no, I wish we wouldn't have gone for the moon, because that sets a bad precedent. Mike, there's a lot of planets out there. If we start going to foreign objects circulating around the sun, we're going to be busted. We're going to run out of money.
Okay,
so I say,
switch it, Bob.
So that's a different show. That's a different show, Michael.
Switch it to the CCC camps. Switch it to how do we get people back involved in America? I've said, listen, I believe national services should be a requirement, and I believe that civics should be a requirement. And I'll tell you why, because I believe that when somebody gives of themselves to something bigger than themselves, it changes their mindset. And what I've seen in not only people younger, but certainly people my age, is this entitlement attitude that I think has permeated our culture. And I don't think it's good.
Here's a question. This is going to be a fun question. And by the way, I'm really enjoying myself, Michael. So this is not, I'm trying to expose you for the big phony that you are. So don't get defensive.
Okay, good.
But you mentioned CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, public service. Is that, when you said that, am I to imply it's compulsory or voluntary?
Well, I mean,
when you said it.
So you're going to hook me, because
you bet.
Yeah, you're leading the question because you already know the answer. And the answer is, I do believe that there should be some form when you're 18 and you sign that dotted line and you say, 2 years, I'm going to give 2 years. Now, you can volunteer where you give your 2 years, but I believe that you should have to give 2 years.
That's not voluntary. How could you use the word voluntary? It's like bait and switch, Michael. It's not voluntary if you go to jail if you don't do it. That's calling us a voluntary tax program.
Well, fair enough. Okay, so you're right. I mean, you're right.
Sorry, Michael. Sorry, Michael.
It's good.
A fault line. So I say no, there should be no compulsory service, because then it's not service. Then it's
conscripted.
It's indentured. It's not a.
Fair enough.
So it's not. It's like Southern chain gangs fixing the roads voluntarily. Michael, they're wearing striped clothing with chains. So, but I agree. People individually, I would do all I can to persuade people to give what they have to others for the right reasons. But I stop at persuading them. We all give money to charity. I encourage people to support the charities that I like, but government compels me to support the charities they like. Well, no, it's my money. If you want me to support whatever program, Section 7 housing, if you want me to provide housing for people with my money, persuade me, but don't point a gun at my head, because then I don't feel good. And the problem with compulsory service is, if I volunteer to clean the beaches in California, I volunteer and I go there on a Saturday morning and I work for 8 hours. I come home, I feel like I'm 10 feet tall. I made a decision free of coercion, to make the world a little bit better place by cleaning the beaches. If I am told, clean the beach or you go to jail, I'm going to be so angry. I'm going to be angry for a month for the same act.
Yeah. It's a great point, Bob. And I think it's a fair point that we want to encourage people to have this type of behavior on their own and not be forced to think this way. So it's fair enough. I think where you've compelled me to really dive deeper into what I believe should be national service really needs to be an encouragement or a persuasion of national service to some degree. And I don't care if it's doctors across borders, teachers across, it picks something to give back, but let us persuade you to give back. And if you choose not to, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I think there just needs to be more, maybe there needs to be more talk around that. Maybe like give service above self as opposed to being selfish.
I couldn't agree more. If we're saying people should be virtuous, of course we agree. If you and I spend our free time, as we do when we broadcast, trying to induce people to become more virtuous, better citizens, that's what we should be doing. And I feel good about trying to do that. But do I want people to be, it's like compelling somebody to be nice. So now they are polite while gritting their teeth.
Yeah.
Do you feel better if somebody is polite because if they're not, they get shot?
Yeah.
No, I don't feel good about that.
Oh, Bob, I got to wrap this up. This is so good.
No, you don't. We'll just do it longer. You don't have to.
I'm going to have to have you back on.
It's your show. You can do whatever you want.
It's true. I wish, and I also know that my viewers, I know my viewers' attention span, but this is so good. So, Bob, I want people to engage in you. So how do they find you? How do they get your book? How do they continue to listen? And we'll probably have you back on the show for sure.
Thank you so much. It's Bob Zadek, Zadek. The podcast is the Bob Zadek Show. There are two podcasts. There's the Best of, which I hate because I think all of them are the best. But there's the regular podcast, and then there's the Best of. The Best of has has selected shows. The podcast has them all. The show is live in the West Coast on about 8 a.m. markets, 8 to 9 a.m. Sunday morning, always a live show, never pre-recorded. It's also live streamed nationally at 860 The Answer. That's the flagship show. And the podcast is available at your leisure. I also have done 4 books available on Amazon, which are compilations of my shows. Thank you for giving me a chance to mention that to the audience, Michael.
Absolutely, Bob. Well, I want people to plug in because I love it when people get out of their echo chambers and they start to listen to other people that might not share their same point of view and challenge their point of view like you did mine. And I appreciate that. And I think that's where there's... Can I give
the audience one parting idea, which I use in my life all the time? I will tell anybody, I find, speaking to another person, your opinion to be, frankly, kind of boring. However, I am so interested in how you formed that opinion. So I don't want to know the answer. I want you to tell me how you got there. And we'll look at our work papers, our intellectual work papers, and both of us get to be smarter. So opinions are unimportant. If the opinion is well thought out, I'll learn something. If it's just made up, I'll dismiss it. That's the secret of interesting conversation with people you disagree with. Just learn the why.
So good, Bob. Well, for our audience, thank you, number one, for being here. Be sure that you guys look up Bob Zadek. Check it out. This book, Essential Liberty, I found the compilation interesting. I've got notes in here. Almost every page is either highlighted, underlined. There are things in here that made me think. So, Bob, thank you for pulling those conversations together in a book. It's a great book. And, you know, I think for our audience, you guys know that there are challenges ahead that are accelerating. And we can't use 20th century thinking anymore to tackle these 21st century problems. So I want you guys to go ahead and lean in to some of America's top VUCA experts. Visit the VUCAprinciple.com. Check that out. Some of the top leaders in this country coming together to tell people how to, or share with people how they navigate difficult times. So Bob, again, thank you for being on the show. Totally grateful.
Thank you so much, Michael. You're a great host.